Hey, Fatherhood and football fans, this is your in studio host, Dad, James Simmons, and we have a special show for you today. Today, we are joined by an Ole Miss fan turned Jackson State fan for a day, and his story has gone viral. Today, I want to welcome Walker Sturgeon to the show. Walker, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Man, I really appreciate you taking some time with this West Coast guy coming from the East Coast. You're in Mississippi. I know you've had kind of a whirlwind of things going on lately as you have shared your story about going to the SWAC Championship. So, again, thank you for being here, and I really appreciate it.
I appreciate it as well, just to get the opportunity to speak. Like I said, I've read about your show, and I really appreciate what you're doing here.
Oh, thank you, thank you, thank you. And let's just get into it, right? Could you just share with the audience a little bit, how we crossed paths just very, very recently and what this is all about?
Well, I'm honestly just an Ole Miss fan who's kind of taken aback about how viral this thing has gone because literally I just went to a Jackson State game as a general fan of all things Mississippi. I took a couple of selfies at the game, just enjoying myself. I posted them online, and then it just I don't know it somehow resonated with everybody. Now it's being circulated all over the country. My story about that, and I not only did I not expect that, but also it kind of doesn't even make sense to me because I've like tried to circulate my stuff before. I'm a a writer, and I try to get stuff out there sometimes. And I had no idea that this would be the thing to kind of get going, but whatever the case, I really am just what I'm what I presented myself as.
Yeah.
I wasn't doing it for the publicity or anything. I was doing it because Coach Deion Sanders' call really resonated with me. So I
Yeah.
was trying to be there to support Mississippi and to support the cause of reconciliation in my state.
Love it, love it. And you said it. Wasn't trying to pull any or bring any attention to yourself. You were just there as a fan, trying to come together with Jackson State. And I gotta say, we just touched base probably Friday of last week. I've been following the story. Uh, uh, Come to be a big Jackson State fan because I love what Coach Prime is doing, not just for the student athletes, but for the community as well. And you said something about
Absolutely.
reconciliation. I do a lot of work in that area in my church of racial reconciliation. So, your story really resonated when I was reading it. And I've shared it with my Facebook audience. I've
I
talked
appreciate
about
that.
coaches' call for all Mississippians. Did I say that right? Mississippians?
Yeah,
Uh,
Mississippians. That's right.
all of them to come to the game, regardless if you're an Ole Miss fan, Mississippi State fan, and some of the other schools out of there. So, you said it. Talk a little bit more about why, because this is important. This is what I love about
Mhm.
what we do on the show. Why
Oh
did
yeah.
you feel the need to go to the game and respond to Coach Prime's call?
It, you kind of got to be familiar with Mississippi's history a little bit, or maybe you don't. I mean, maybe is this is a general national experience, but whatever the case, in Mississippi, still kind of live in our own spaces, right? The time of legal segregation is over. The time of I'd even say like individual racism and things like that is not the force it once was. But at the end of the day, we're still the products of systemic racism in many ways. And one of the leftovers from that is that we kind of still exist in our own little bubble, in our own little
Mhm,
spaces, right?
mhm.
And this is true for especially when it comes to historically black colleges and universities football. Down here in the South, we have the SWAC, Southwestern Athletic Conference. It's a lot like the SEC in many ways, many parallel histories, many things like that. You're not going to hear very many white Mississippians or anybody like that, talking about the SWAC or any of that kind of stuff. That's still not, a cultural space or anything that they are invested in. You're
Yeah,
not going to hear, for example, any Mississippian come up and say, "Hey, you know what? Mississippi in 1962, we had two national championship teams.
right.
We had Ole Miss won the championship. We had Jackson State that won the championship." And they're not only going to, not make a statement like that. They're not really going to even understand what it means because they're not privy to this culture. These parallel cultures, and
Right.
um, that's the kind of thing that keeps us divided, living in our own little circles to this day. So, in terms of listening to Coach Deion Sanders' call, I don't know. I just in my whole life living here, I had never heard anyone say anything like that.
Yeah.
And that may sound crazy. It's like you've never heard anyone say, set aside your differences and come together as Mississippians. No, I really haven't because it's like it's almost like a taboo thing. It's like this. The expectation is not that white people will go to or care about SWAC football. That's not something white people expect to do. That's not something black people expect us to do. It's just
Yeah.
not. That's not in any way something people are expecting. Somebody said, well, we want Ole Miss fans, we want
Yeah.
State fans, we want
Yep.
Southern Miss fans, we want everybody to be here because this is not just about Jackson State. This is about bringing glory and prestige and honor to our state. I
Yes.
just said, wow, that just blew me away. I never, I, no one had ever presented something that
Yeah.
way, and I just immediately knew that I had to be there. I didn't know. I mean, like he said it on like a Tuesday before the
Yep.
game or
Yep.
something. He
Yep.
didn't give us just a whole lot of heads up. It was a midweek
Yeah.
press
Yeah.
conference. He probably wasn't even thinking about it. He is a prime time after all. This is a guy
Right.
who knows how to market himself and how
Yeah.
to how to run the mechanisms of media. So he might not have even really considered deeply about the implications of what he was saying. He probably
Right.
just said something online, but I don't. It really resonated with me
Yeah.
because I'm a historian. I'm getting my PhD in history right now, and
Yeah.
not only that, but all of my experience growing up in the state, this was a lot bigger to me than he might have realized.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, I just immediately knew that I had to be there and support this. I had to write about it. I wrote an article about it. I tried to get as many people as I possibly could to go to the game, and
Hmm.
I didn't have all that much success because part of the reason is because, well, like I said, it was in the middle of the week when you said it to begin with, and then
Hmm.
also, like I said, it's not like when you ask a white person to go to a Jackson State game, they're like, uh,
Yeah. Yeah.
man, I'm sorry. This weekend, I got things going on. There's the
Right.
SEC championship. Anyway,
Yeah.
I didn't care about all that. I went to the game myself, and I walked up in there, and I had the time of my life,
Yeah.
and it was a great and wonderful experience, and I was glad I could be a part of it.
And I'm glad you shared it with us. I mean, you said so much just there. And, I am not a historian, but as I've gotten older, history has been important to me. And I've read articles, I've read books, I've looked at videos and movies to get myself more educated on what's going on in the world and how we are where we are today. Because the things of the past definitely affect where we are today. And a young man like yourself, you definitely give me lots of hope uh, and a lots of just pride because I got to say the things that I've known, excuse me, about Mississippi, I was a little scared to go down there. You know what I mean? But you
Yeah,
talked
we have a
about,
bad reputation.
yeah, yeah, and that's got to change. And acts like what you've done is getting us on that path to change. You've educated me on how much pride there is in Jackson State winning a national champion back when there was the SEC. And a lot of people don't understand the similarities and how important the game of football are to us culturally, ethnically, and so on and so forth. So I learned something, and I think the more we can learn about each other, the better off we'll be. Uh,
Absolutely. Now, honestly, let me take you back to that for a
Please.
second. Your perception of Mississippi as someone from New York, as someone living on the West Coast, this kind of thing. This is something that also very much appeals to me because, as you said, Mississippi's reputation in the national eye is not a super positive one, right? I mean, I mentioned in my article and
Yeah.
whatnot. Anytime we get recognition at all, it's inevitably for some terrible thing that's happened. Anytime Hollywood makes a movie about us or all that kind of stuff, it's some harrowing reminder of how terrible we are.
Yes.
We don't get to kind of sit back and appreciate the good things about our state. We don't get to the country doesn't like get exposed to the reason that most of us really like it. And even those of us who move away, lots of people have family living in other parts of the state. They still gravitate back to Mississippi. They
Oh, yeah.
still come back to the mannerisms and the hospitality and all the kind of stuff that we exude as a state. It still has a magnetic force, and the rest of the country doesn't see that part of Mississippi because, well, they're too busy focusing on the negative racial aspects. And I'm
Right.
not saying we don't deserve that. I mean, Mississippi does, in fact, have a disturbing legacy
Mhm.
of racism and whatnot. A lot, the vestiges of that are still very much with us today. And I do not mean to diminish that reality, but at the same time, I still don't think we get a fair shake. And I
Yeah.
really do want to do what I can to help improve our national image and help people understand what it is that makes Mississippi a great place.
Yeah. 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 And again, the football aspect bringing us together. Mississippi is part of the United States, just as New York is, just as California is. We're only going to be as good as we are good together. So again, I appreciate it, man. And I'd love to hear a little bit more about your experience. I know what it's like in my day to day walks of life of being the only black face in a lot of places. And sometimes that's a
Yep.
little intimidating. There's not that
Yeah.
comfort. So, can you just share what your experience was like at the SWAC championship?
Well, I can clear that, but also to back up a little bit further, you mentioned earlier that you moved out of Queens when you were a young child and moved into a mostly white space and all this kind of stuff, and you kind
Yes.
of it was a little bit of a cultural shakeup, and you used football as kind of a way to bridge the gap in that community. Well, my experience is a little bit different in respect to football. You see, I grew up in Mississippi, and well, there's frankly lots of black people here. I mean, it's 40% of our state. I think we have the highest percentage of any state in terms of overall African American
Hmm.
population. So,
Hmm.
and I didn't go to one of the little segregation academies like a lot of white people did. I went to a public school. I went to the Soda Central High School, where well, probably the demographics were about like the state. It was probably about 40% black, 60% white, somewhere in there. But the
Yep.
football team,
Hmm.
as you might expect, they were, good 70%
Yep.
African American. It's so the people that I was hanging out with, the spaces where I was, putting in all my extra time, whether it was practicing football or lifting weights or running track, all that kind of stuff. That was, I was with and surrounded by
Hmm.
African American people all the time. I was the white boy.
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm. Hmm.
that's kind of, you know,
Yep.
I've been that in many points in my life. So
Gotcha.
it's not like that was some kind of new thing to me. And as a
Right.
matter of fact, that's kind of the space I grew up in. Once I got to college, there was me,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
then all the other defensive linemen, they were African American. So
Yep. Yep.
here I am sitting in that room. That's a place I know how to be very well.
Gotcha.
And like you said, it can be a little bit jarring to be the only person around that looks like yourself. But at the same time, I do feel that if anyone's kind of well equipped to brave those new grounds or whatever, that I'm definitely the person for that kind of thing. But anyway,
It,
to the,
there's
to the
some.
Jackson State game,
Yeah. Yeah.
going back to that. So how can I put it? I, Not a single person there was rude.
Hmm.
They were all warm and welcoming, and they were everything we wish to embody as the hospitality state in Mississippi. I mean,
Yep.
they really were. They took me in. They were nice. Now, as I walked in, I was walking by, and as per Coach Prime's request, I was wearing my Ole Miss stuff. Right, I had
Yeah.
my,
Yeah.
my, my Ole Miss vest on. I had my khaki pants. I had my little Mississippi flag and stuff, and I stuck out like a
Yeah.
sore thumb. Not only
Yeah.
because I'm white, but because it's like I was dressed like what I am.
Yeah. Yeah.
I specifically said like I'm not here to appropriate anyone's culture.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to, you know, claim something that is mine that it's not, like
Hmm.
obnoxious white people do. No, I'm here to support.
Yeah.
So I figured it was best to present myself exactly as such.
Yeah.
But anyway, I did draw some
Some attention.
interesting expressions, put it that way. Yeah, they were, some people that cocking that eyebrow, looking at me a little bit like, what is this boy doing? And that's kind of to be expected
Yeah.
because I
Yeah.
was, with a very few exceptions, the only white person there. I
Right.
mean, like I was up in the stadium playing Where's Waldo a little bit, trying to see some others, and I found a few that I was, for all intents and purposes, in any space there was, I was just the only white guy there. I was the
Right.
only one walking by,
Yeah.
and so the only thing that was a little bit funny was the funny expressions I got. Just everybody, some of the people was looking at me like, what
Right.
in the world are you
Right.
doing? Like, just the very confused
Yeah.
expressions.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it wasn't, I had no time, I didn't feel endangered or threatened or
Yeah.
really even unwelcome, but I did feel awkward, perhaps.
Folks
and,
trying to
and
put it
just,
together. Like, what is this guy doing here?
yeah,
He got his old Miss
exactly.
gear on and his
Some
khakis.
of them even came up, yeah, yeah, yeah. Some of them came up to ask me, like, "What are you doing here, man?" I'm like, "I'm
Love it.
here. I'm here by Coach Prime's
Yeah.
invitation to support the
Yeah.
state of Mississippi." And they're like, "Really?" Because
Yeah.
they didn't expect that. They kind
Exactly.
of didn't expect anybody to actually be here like that. But
Yeah.
that's what I told them, and that's
Yeah.
what I meant. They accepted that answer, and with that, they were, just as welcoming as
Yeah.
they've been on social media all this
Right.
time. I've never met more people who've been more supportive
Awesome.
of that
Yeah.
than the people of Jackson State.
Yeah,
Um,
and my response to the call from coach, right, is like, football is football. Why not? You know what I mean? Because it kind of shocked me when he made that call. He's like, this is Mississippi versus everybody. And just
yeah.
love that attitude and the folks who stepped up to take part in that. So awesome. I love your JSU hat on there. I think one of the reasons why I like Jackson State so much is because my name is James Simmons. So I got that
James
James Simmons,
Simmons.
that JS, and put that U there. I kind of like it. But listen, man, I I I
Yes, sir.
I know this football is important to you, right? It's something that
Absolutely.
you've played. You talked about high school. you went to Ole Miss, you played,
Mhm.
6'3", 260-pound defensive end, you know what I
Something
mean?
like that. Now first off, let me say, like, to say I played is a bit of an exaggeration. I was a walk on. I didn't get my scholarship until the last couple of years, and I
Okay.
was behind many greater players, Robert Condici, Levon Hooks, these sorts of guys
Yep.
started ahead of me. But
Yeah.
I did letter my last 2 years. But yeah, I'm not trying to sell myself as some like former great SEC player or something. Yeah, I played a little, but
Yeah.
mostly I was just a supporting teammate. That's
Gotcha.
that's who I see myself as the
And
Ole Miss guy.
and I could appreciate it. I walked on my first year at Fordham. I didn't earn a scholarship until my sophomore, junior years. So I get you. You know what I mean? But you're part of the
Mhm.
team. You played some SEC ball, and that's pretty cool. So the game is still important to you today. You go to the games. Talk about that experience. What does the game mean to you?
The game it's more than just about the sports and stuff like that. And when I try to get people in football, particularly, a lot of the women I know who are my friends and everything. Well, I'm sorry. All right, so I work in upper academia, right? I'm
Yep.
getting
Yep.
my PhD in history. I work around a lot of, you know, lofty, hoity-toity academic types who come from, these kind of prestigious backgrounds. You probably know these people in New York a lot more than I do in Mississippi. The Ivy League types, all
Gotcha.
these kind of people who
Yep.
they might go to the Harvard Yale game and but they don't really understand football. They don't.
Right.
To them, it's just like they're looking at this game and these dudes throwing each other around, and they don't get it. What I try to explain to them is that okay, yes, like you can appreciate the game unto itself, but really you're here for the atmosphere.
Right.
You're here because this means something more than just the game. This is an expression of culture and meaning
Yeah.
that you can really get behind, and that's what really gets you into football. I'm not here to watch this game just because I like to watch players play. If I was into that, I'd watch on TV. No,
Yep. Yep.
I'm here because I'm part of this much bigger thing,
Yeah.
and it's difficult to express that to people who didn't grow up with it. You
Gotcha.
know,
Yeah. Yeah.
I of course grew up with it. I'm a third generation Ole Miss guy. My grandfather grew up telling me stories about Chunky Charlie Connerly, Ole
Right.
Miss's great quarterback who played there in New York for the New York Giants throughout the 1950s. So
Yeah.
I know all about the football culture, and I grew up with it, and I you know have to explain it to people that way. So that's what the game means to me
Yeah.
on a personal level. And furthermore, I understand that everybody has a similar experience to me in Mississippi because we are just a diehard football culture. And as I said earlier, in different cultures here in Mississippi between black people, right? Different musical traditions,
Yeah.
different worship traditions, different
Yeah.
football traditions, and really they haven't always crossed over, but they still are there.
Yeah.
That's how I can understand all this stuff about SWAC football.
Yeah.
And how I really got into SWAC football was in 2009. Um, Alcorn State University, which is
Mhm.
actually Jackson State's rival,
Mhm.
I was a recruit for them.
Yep.
I wasn't, some highly talented recruit or anything, but Alcorn, they were just as courteous as they could be, and they really wanted me to be their token white boy.
Yeah.
They
Yeah.
didn't
Yeah.
put it that way, but you got
Wow.
to get one of those out there
Yeah.
when you're in HBCU. But
Yeah.
anyhow, I went to the Alcorn Jackson State Capital City Classic in 2009, and I just immediately knew that this was different, but this was every bit as valuable as everything I had grown up with in the SEC.
Yeah. Yeah.
All these deep-seated generational traditions that enriched itself, that was all on display and strikingly apparent. And I,
Yeah.
I feasted on it
Yeah.
as a high school kid. I can tell you, I feasted on the Capital City Classic.
Yeah.
Everything from the bands constantly
Yeah.
doing, everything from the tailgating culture they have,
Yeah.
everything from actually like they say actual prayers before the game in SWAC games. Like
Right.
we have our moments of silence and everything. I don't know. Like
Yeah.
they don't care about your moments of silence. They're gonna bow their heads and say a prayer before the game. Like
Right.
I mean, it's funny that I'm getting all this for being a Jackson State guy because I've
Yeah.
always pulled for Alcorn to win the SWAC
Right.
and
Right.
all that
Right.
kind of stuff. But anyway, that's how I understood both personally
Yeah.
what football means to me and what it means to the African American community. Because in Mississippi, football is sometimes the only thing we have. I
Gotcha.
mean, y'all up there or out in New York or out in the West Coast, I mean, y'all have, big concerts and celebrities and
Yeah.
professional football teams, and y'all get a lot of the kind of cultural capital that
Mhm.
makes your state a rich one in terms of things you can do and be a part of.
Right.
Mississippi, we don't have any
A little
pro
different.
football teams. Like I
Yeah.
said, there's not even really any good movies about us. we're just strictly a flyover state. As a matter of fact, I think during Hurricane Katrina or one of the big hurricanes, they identified Mississippi as the landmass between Mobile and New Orleans, like
Gotcha.
the landmass,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
That's what we are. So what do we have in Mississippi? Well, we got football. That's just about it. And
That's what
this
you
is to
got.
a black and white Mississippians and all
Yeah.
of us. And so, what does football mean to me? What does football mean to Mississippi?
Yeah.
It quite literally means everything,
Yeah.
and that's not an exaggeration. It's
No, I hear you. I hear you.
all we
Gotcha. And listen, man, I so appreciate it. And one of the things I hope the audience gets from,
have.
this interview is, a West Coast, a East Coast guy moved out to the West Coast and a black guy, a white Mississippian, if they was a CS, they would be, it's like night and day, not just the color, but the size, right? Probably the age, got you by a couple of years, but there's just so many similarities, man. And we need to just rejoice over the things that
Absolutely,
we have in common, the things that are different, celebrate those things. It makes us
absolutely,
richer, makes us richer. So, man, that's what I hope folks, get from this
absolutely.
interview.
That's the thing. The differences need not separate us.
Right.
That's another thing. Like, to get back to the Jackson State game, one thing I was looking forward to after 10 years away from this atmosphere, one
Mhm.
thing I got very much at this Jackson State game, one thing I was very happy to see had not changed
Yeah.
was the band culture that they
Yes.
have in SWAC football.
Yeah.
Now, this might be a broader historically black colleges and university tradition. I'm not sure if it is, but I know when it comes to the SWAC, the thing you
Yeah.
know about is the bands,
Yep.
and the game it's like a throwback to a different time, and I mean that in the best way possible
Mhm.
because Jackson State it doesn't have a huge jumbotron where they can blast new hits and familiar for everybody to clap along to, and kind
Yep.
of a big light show like all the rest of the state. I spent this whole season as an Ole Miss fan. I went to at least five other stadiums this season. I of course went to Paul Hemingway Stadium in Ole Miss. I went to the first game of the season in Atlanta, the Georgia Dome.
Mhm.
I went to Alabama. I went to Auburn. I went to all these places throughout the season, and
Yep.
all of them are similar in that the band is just kind of there. I mean, yeah, you're going to play your fight song, every now and then. You're going to hear the band.
Yep.
That's great. But Jackson State and Prairie View, when they were playing, the band was 90% of what you were hearing. I mean, they might have played a little music as the band was getting set up for the halftime show, but no, the Battle of the Bands was going and
Yeah.
relentless and nonstop, and that provided the entire entertainment atmosphere for the whole stadium, and it was magical. And
Right.
I'm telling you, that is something a lot of other programs have lost touch with.
Right.
The Jackson State still very much has.
Nice.
It still has that vibrant old school college
Mhm.
football band atmosphere. And
Yeah.
man, I was digging it. I tell you, like I like that kind of stuff. I'm a
Nice.
historian, man. I
Yeah.
like to step back and appreciate this kind of thing.
Right.
Um,
Right.
a wonderful thing to be a part of.
Awesome, man.
So
And
yeah,
and
that's
and
one more thing
again,
I wanted to say about that.
you you're bringing good memories back. Like I said, as an East Coast guy, gratefully we had two channels, right? But on those Saturday afternoons, Grambling State, Eddie Robinson coach the battle of the bands. Those were things that we look forward to, and gave us a little
Yeah,
taste of what the SWAC is. And of course, as you get older, you have your own opinions and you can look at into things a little bit more and definitely the SWAC, not just the football, but basketball and other things taking a much greater interest in. So, man, I appreciate it. I want to give you an opportunity. Excuse me. What do you want to leave the audience with, man? You gave us so much, just about coming together in unity. Want to give you an opportunity to leave a last word.
well, if I can just say one last thing,
Yeah.
maybe a couple of things. First off, it's that while I do appreciate the attention I've been getting from this has been huge for me as a writer
Hmm.
and for promoting my stuff and whatnot. And that's been great. But I don't want people to lose touch with the fact that I meant what I said, and that the focus should stay on Jackson State
Yeah.
and on this ongoing HBCU sports renaissance
Yeah.
that Deion Sanders and other people like him are contributing to as we speak.
Yeah.
That should be the main focus right now, and any focus that falls to me should simply be in service of bolstering that. If that
Hmm.
makes sense. I'm saying I don't want to steal the show here.
Yep.
That's the
Yep.
real story.
I
I'm
got
not. That's right. That's the first thing. The second thing is, I just hope that anybody listening to this or anybody who reads about this story or reads any of my work comes to a greater appreciation of what Mississippi has to offer in terms of our statehood,
yeah,
because we may not have a whole lot in Mississippi, but we're not just a whole bunch of knuckle dragging hicks
hmm
who are filled with nothing but hate. And we're not the caricatures
yeah,
that are often presented in the national eye.
yeah,
Um, our qualities, like all human beings, are much more complex than that. But either way, I think that I wouldn't want to live in any other state. I mean, I might have to because the jobs are gravitating
right,
elsewhere. But
right,
this sort of down to earth, hospitable, family oriented, rural atmosphere we have going on, there really is something about that that makes it a place worth being in,
yeah.
a place worth being a part of. And I hope that perhaps people can appreciate that there's more to Mississippi than just the stereotypes that define us in the national eye.
Gotcha.
So anyway, that's all I got, and I appreciate you having me on the show.
Listen, man, I really thank you. This is what my show is about, bringing people together. We use football as a part of that, and we talk fatherhood, but we talk about the big issues as well. We're better together, and that's what this is about. I really appreciate you
Absolutely.
taking the time. You've given me a different perspective of your home state. And when I come down, I will look you up. I'll let you know, hey, James is coming to town, man, because I'd love to experience some of that that Mississippi hospitality that you're talking about. So I
Oh,
really
you
appreciate
will get it. Come on down and give it to you.
it. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I really appreciate it. And thanks, guys. Listen, we'll be back with you next week with another episode of Fatherhood and Football. Thanks.